In 1959, a man put a 3-ton block of ice into a truck. Then he drove that truck across 8,500 kilometers of road through the heat of the Sahara Desert, where temperatures hit 50 degrees centigrade, where the sand is so hot it softens iron, where there is no shade, no cold, and no mercy. He had no refrigerator, he had no freezer, he had no cooling system of any kind. And he had to deliver that ice in one single piece, all the way from the frozen Arctic coast of Norway to the sweltering capital of Gabon in Central Africa. The prize, if he succeeded, was $48 million. The catch was that nobody in the world believed it was possible. This is the story of the most insane bet ever made on a block of ice. To understand how this whole thing started, you need to go back to 1958 and a radio station that most people today have never heard of. Radio Luxembourg was one of the most listened to commercial radio stations in the world at the time, broadcasting across Europe and beyond. And its producers had a habit of running elaborate public challenges designed to capture the imagination of their audience. In 1958, they announced what they called the Ice Block Challenge. The rules were simple, brutal, and apparently impossible. Someone had to take a 3-ton block of ice from the Arctic region of Norway and transport it by road, only by road. No air freight, no shipping the ice itself, all the way to Libreville, the capital city of Gabon on the west coast of Central Africa. The ice had to arrive in one single unbroken piece. No refrigeration was permitted at any stage of the journey. And the reward for completing it was 100,000 Luxembourg francs for every kilogram of ice that arrived intact, which worked out, for a full 3-ton block, to approximately $48 million in today's money. Radio Luxembourg announced the challenge with complete confidence because they genuinely believed nobody could pull it off. They were almost right. For months after the challenge was broadcast, nothing happened.
No one came forward. Engineers looked at the numbers and shook their heads. The route alone was a nightmare. 8,500 kilometers from the Norwegian city of Mo i Rana down through Denmark, the Netherlands, Belgium, France, Spain, and Morocco, across the Mediterranean by ferry, and then through 2,500 kilometers of the Algerian Sahara Desert before finally reaching Gabon. The Sahara stretch alone, where daytime temperatures regularly exceed 50 degrees centigrade, was enough to make any refrigeration engineer wince. Ice exposed to 50-degree heat without any cooling does not melt slowly, it collapses. And the rules said no refrigerator. The challenge sat unanswered for months, while Radio Luxembourg quietly assumed they were safe. Then a man named Birger Notvik read about the challenge in a newspaper and saw something everyone else had missed. Notvik was the managing director of Glasfat, a Norwegian insulation manufacturing company. And where everyone else saw an impossible physics problem, Notvik saw an advertisement. If he could transport a 3-ton block of ice across the Sahara Desert without refrigeration, using only his company's insulation materials, he would not just win $48 million, he would prove to the entire world, in the most dramatic way imaginable, that Glasfat's insulation technology worked better than anything else on the market. He announced publicly that he was accepting the challenge. The headlines came immediately. Newspapers across Europe picked up the story. Radio Luxembourg, which had assumed the challenge would never be seriously attempted, suddenly realized they might actually have to pay out. And so, quietly and without any public announcement, they withdrew the prize money, citing a technicality in the original rules. The reward was gone before Notvik had cut a single block of ice. Notvik found out about the withdrawal and made a decision that says everything about his character. He was going to do it anyway. Not for the money, that was gone. He was going to do it because he had told the world he could, because his company's reputation was now attached to the outcome, and because somewhere deep down, he simply wanted to know if it was possible. He assembled a team, an engineer,
4 drivers, a truck mechanic, and 2 cameramen to document the journey, and went to work on the logistics. The ice block would be cut from a glacier in sections of 200 kilograms each, lowered by helicopter to ground level, then refrozen and bonded together into a single solid block weighing 3,050 kilograms.
That block would be loaded into a specially prepared truck container, lined on all sides with thick layers of glass wool insulation, the same material Glassvat manufactured and sold commercially, and the journey would begin. Shell agreed to provide all the fuel. A truck manufacturer provided the vehicle. By the time they were ready to depart in February 1959, the whole operation had attracted enough media attention that sponsors were lining up to be associated with it. On the 22nd of February 1959, the truck rolled out of Mo I Rana, Norway, with a 3-ton block of ice in its container and a team of 8 people in the cab and support vehicles. The first week was almost pleasant. The roads through Denmark, the Netherlands, Belgium, and France were good. The weather was cool, and the insulation was doing exactly what it was designed to do. In every city the convoy passed through, crowds gathered to watch. In Paris, the police gave them a special escort through the crowded city streets, and the mayor himself invited the crew in for a meeting. It felt, for that first week, less like an impossible challenge and more like a victory lap. The ice was holding, the truck was running, the team was in good spirits. Then they reached Africa, and everything changed at once. The moment the truck crossed into the Saharan interior, the temperature outside climbed past 40 degrees and kept going. The road, to the extent there was a road at all, became loose sand that grabbed at the truck's tires with every kilometer. The engine temperature gauge crept upward in the heat. This irreplaceable, career-defining ice began to sweat inside its insulated container. Not melt, not yet, but sweat. The temperature differential between the inside of the container and the outside air was enormous, and every time someone opened the container to check on the block, they could feel the cold air escaping and the hot air flooding in. They started opening it as rarely as possible, and for as short a time as they could manage. The desert threw problems at them constantly. The truck became stuck in the sand repeatedly, sometimes multiple times in a single day, and each time it happened, the entire team had to dig it out by hand under the full force of the Saharan sun, which cost them hours they could not afford. The route took them through a region where an active conflict was underway. Algerian independence fighters were operating in the mountains along the road, and the French Foreign Legion was deployed in the area. The Legion gave the convoy a security escort through the most dangerous sections and delivered a simple instruction: keep moving, take as few stops as possible, do not draw attention to yourself. The convoy They drove through the night when they could, stopped only when they had to, and pressed on toward Gabon with the kind of exhausted single-mindedness that only comes from knowing that stopping completely is not an option. At one point, meltwater from the ice block was used to water the camels of desert travelers they passed, making it, as one crew member later noted, probably the most expensive water those animals had ever drunk. After 28 days on the road, 10 of them in the Saharan heat, the truck pulled into Libreville, Gabon. The city had been following the journey on the radio for weeks, and a crowd had gathered to meet them. Everyone wanted to know the same thing: how much ice was left. Natvij and his team opened the container in front of the assembled crowd. Inside, battered and sweating but solid and whole, sat the ice block. Somebody produced a scale. The original weight had been 3,050 kilograms. After 8,500 kilometers, 28 days, and 2,500 kilometers of Saharan desert with no refrigeration, the block weighed 2,714 kilograms. Only 336 kilograms had melted, 11% of the original mass. 89% of the ice had survived the journey intact. The crowd, many of whom had never seen ice in their lives, watched in amazement as the block was broken up and distributed among the people of Libreville, a gift of frozen water from the Arctic,
delivered by a Norwegian insulation salesman who refused to accept that something was impossible just because everyone said it was.
Radio Luxembourg never paid a single franc. They had withdrawn the prize before the journey even started, and Nadvik had known that when he set off. He did it anyway, and it was the best business decision he ever made. Glasfat sales increased dramatically in the years following the challenge. The company still exists today, manufacturing insulation under the name Glava, and the 1959 Ice Block Challenge remains one of the most effective product demonstrations in the history of marketing. A 3-ton block of ice, 8,500 kilometers, 50-degree heat, no refrigerator, 11% lost. Nadvik did not just transport ice across a desert. He proved that the right material, applied with enough determination, can keep almost anything alive. Through almost anything the world throws at it. Subscribe to RM Journal for the stories the world forgot to tell you.